again. This is Alex, and in our previous video, we were looking at companies that are growth oriented in Tableau, and we found them inside our scatter plots that we plotted, where we took revenues against the market capitalization of the company, and we added yield to color, which is net income divided by market capitalization, to find companies that are highly valued and are profitable. And when we zoomed into some of them, they all happen to also have a growth component to them, which explained the high valuations for those companies. And here in Tableau, I'm connected to my Postgres server that I'm running on my analytics database. And so the question is, how can we find more growth companies? How can we filter for them? To do it just inside Tableau is not that easy. So I'm going to head and open my pgadmin console and let's take a look at the data using SQL. So here I have my data set that I've been analyzing in Tableau. And what I'm interested in is to find companies that have an upward slope. So let's see how we can do that. Let's select a symbol. And we're going to group by symbol. Okay, so this will just give us a list of symbols. Now, I've already started the query before, but the function we're going to use is regression slope. And I was going to do it by revenues and by year quarter. So the question that we're trying to ask is, can we look at companies who have a positive slope as the year quarter increases, so do their revenues? Okay, so let's take a quick look. And let's do an order by. Let's do descending. And we need to filter out the nulls because we don't have data for certain companies. Whoops, it is not null. Okay, so there we go. We have Amazon, Google, Apple, all are Alibaba. They're all growth companies that have grown. And this is, we're looking here for all time. We may want to further filter by year. For example, we can say where year, let's say greater than 2015. Okay, so all these companies have grown in absolute terms, but they also have very different amounts of revenue. So it's hard to compare them because their stock price and their market valuation would reflect their particular range of revenues, as we saw in the scatter plot in Tableau. What we're looking for is growth companies within their own division. So we may want to somehow normalize them by dividing perhaps by the average of their revenues. And let's keep the original. There's that. And let's call it N for normalized. Let's do that. Let's see what we will get. Oops, division by 0. Of course, we do not want that. So we need to make sure and the average revenues are greater than 0. Perfect. Okay, so these companies have grown, have the highest slope has a positive slope as a function of their average revenues since 2015. So they're all growth stocks, and we can see some will be growing downwards. And if you are also a short bear, you could consider those as potentially short opportunities, or maybe they're turnaround stocks. Whatever you decide is your style of investing, or maybe they're just something to avoid altogether. And let's only look at companies that are going up, up, and up. Of course, we may want to filter down to companies that have a smaller market capitalization because they haven't hit their industry ceiling yet, so there's room for them to grow within their industry. Nonetheless, we have some interesting stocks that we can take a look. Let's add a limit. Let's limit it to 100. Okay, let's comment these out, and we can now create a set of these symbols in Tableau. Well, okay, let's do this. Let's leave this here, and then we can just simply select symbol from subquery, and there we go. We can now copy these companies. Let's go back to Tableau, and let's create a new set. So let's create a new set in Tableau, and where are we going to do that? Where is the create set? Create calculated field. We could probably look at some of our existing sets. Export data. I was pretty sure that there was a create set button somewhere. I thought it would be here. You can create calculated fields. Okay, well, I apologize. I should have looked at this ahead of time. But let's look at interesting companies and see if we can paste the companies into here. Well, it appears not. Okay, that's okay. Let's just stick to SQL. Here's what we can do. We can create a view. Create view. Let's call it growth stocks as. And here's going to be our view. Okay, so we have growth stocks. Let's go to our data source. And let's just do a left join. I want to do a refresh. Okay. Let's find our growth stocks view here in Tableau. Actually, if we do an inner join, we're just going to filter out all the data that we do not need. And maybe that's great. We're going to be dealing with a smaller data set, and we don't have to filter for it manually. Perfect. Let's do that. So now, when we go to our data sheets, they can be quite filter out. So let's, here's our revenue yield and market cap workbook, and much fewer companies now. Now we did say top 100, but that's because I have already certain filters on revenues. Some of them may have actually been quite small in terms of their revenues. Let's take a look here. We want to remove our previous set, and we want to remove that. Let's remove all filters. Okay, so we have a lot of interesting data here. They're all differently at very different levels of revenue. Let's look at it logarithmically. And a lot of them look like fairly new companies. We have some missing data, and this is kind of difficult to look at. So let's add some filters. Let's say the year will need to be at least 2020. Okay. So we have different revenues, and they're all generally going up. Now, a lot of these companies would already possibly have higher valuations. Okay, that's okay. Let's just duplicate this sheet. And what we'd want to do is, for example, let's look at the yield. Or let's look at their stock prices as well. That would be actually quite interesting. So let's look at price. Let's look at the stock price quarter average. And let's look at the average of the stock price. And some of them have actually gone down in stock price, which is quite interesting. Again, let's probably want to look at it logarithmically. You can see a lot of them are sort of penny stocks down here, and there's some that are not. So let's even though we have a growth relationship here, let's actually edit the trend lines, remove that, and let's guess we're probably going to be looking at an exponential growth rate. There's a linear relationship between these basket of stocks and them growing in revenue, yet for some reason their stock prices, which perhaps really depends on the number of shares outstanding. You can't really compare the stock prices themselves. Yeah, it seems like there is a negative aggregate relationship with those companies. So perhaps these stocks were seen as growth stocks in 2020, and perhaps they sort of fell out of flavor. This could be interesting analysis. Let's take a look at some of these companies. What is GLBL? Let's open up Yahoo stocks and take a look at GLBL. Oh, perhaps it's not even listed anymore. Okay, let's take a look at some other company here. Something in the middle. Alpha Partners Technology. Okay, APTM. Let's see what is APTM. APTM. Okay. Oh, okay. Interesting kinds of stock that is going up. It's actually their stock price looks like has gone up quite a bit, and it looks like they're fairly thinly traded stock though, and fairly low volume. Looks like they have a fairly high price to earnings ratio, and so definitely it's a small cap of 375 million. But that looks like a interesting company to perhaps learn more about if you are interested in smaller growth stocks. And if you don't want to analyze individual companies, perhaps you could just select a basket of them and hope that this trend reverses perhaps, and they do go up eventually if their revenues keep going up, or perhaps not. So you could do more backtesting for these types of companies as we get more data for them, more than just 2 years worth. And as we accumulate more data for these types of companies in the database, it would be much easier to do back tests and find growth stocks in the database that may or may not do well in the future. And nonetheless, it's interesting data to look at. So there you go. We've used a little bit of SQL and Tableau to help us find companies we may have never known about even existed out there on the wild stock exchange. Hope you learned something. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.